The bigger picture, really. Stay focused on the bigger picture. Because I think ultimately you can get bogged down by all the small things, and they can start to frustrate you, and then they can start to sort of almost even at a certain point frustrate you, intimidate you. If you got the bigger picture in mind all the time, you kind of have to take a step back and see, like, what are you working towards? What is the goal? You know, look down, have that 5-year plan, have that 10-year plan, try to figure out kind of what that is, what that means to you, like how important you value that, like give it some real weight around it, and then just don't let the small shit kind of hold you down.
From feeling unemployable to creating Austin's #1 chiropractic clinic, not once, but twice. Andrew's story is proof that caring and hard work pays off. We dive into his journey, his business, and his strategy, and what it really takes to succeed. In this episode, you'll discover how Andrew overcame financial fear, his most effective strategies for marketing, key insights on scaling a service-based health practice, and the importance of building community. Let's go. Andrew, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Another chiropractor in the seat.
Yes, doing it.
Let's do this. So where I'd like to start is a question that I actually don't have on this list here that we didn't talk about. But do you have any entrepreneurship in your family?
Yeah, I do, actually. My dad has opened his own business in consulting, so he does a lot of like European stuff. When you ask me if I can explain what he does, no.
Okay. So did you grow up as like that was kind of part of the household?
No, not really. Usually part of the household was financial fear.
Okay. Okay.
So that's actually was kind of a big pigeonhole for me starting my own clinic. Really, it was just like, oh no, I don't know if I feel comfortable with this. So entrepreneurship was not necessarily something we were kind of raised with, but it was something that kind of like I think spawned in later life in a way of just recognizing we can't get exactly everything we want unless we do what we need to do for ourselves. Being like, ultimately, if you put me in underneath a boss or something like that, I'm going to find that there's might be a different route that I want to go, but you're still stuck within the structure of the red tape. And so at a certain point, you feel like you just got to bust out. And I think that's really kind of the jump off point that you're looking for.
Yeah, I don't think it's for everybody, but to your point, I would say most people that it does end up falling into their lap are people that are, for lack of a better way of saying this, is like unemployable, is that they get frustrated by feeling restricted, I guess, on what they want to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think is like the biggest thing. I think that was kind of my biggest draw to it. It's just simply, I worked for different practitioners, and when you first get out of chiropractic school, you get this concept of like that chiropractors eat their own. It's like more or less you're just going to get paid to do the grunt work, and you're going to get really overlooked and undertreated and all the other above things. And so you kind of recognize that when you're just coming out, that this is sort of a part of the process. But then when you kind of recognize a few years later down the road, you're still in that space, you're like, now frustration sets in, where you're kind of like, I just need to kind of figure out my next step. And so I chose that through different routes. The biggest thing for me initially coming out of chiropractic school was financially, right? I just couldn't afford to start my own thing. And also too, I don't think I was mentally ready to start my own thing. I kind of needed just to be in there, get my feet wet a little bit, figure out how my style of practice, which has evolved tremendously through day one to where I am now. So that was helpful. So I take it kind of for what it was, but there's a point when you just hit a threshold where it's like, what do I do next? Or I'm not fully fulfilled because I'm stuck and regulated too much.
I don't take you as a guy that probably has many regrets, but I do have a question around that of if you were to give advice to your younger self, do you wish you would have started the business earlier, or are you glad that you didn't?
No, because I feel like part of that is the process, it's just the whole process involved with it. I don't think I would have been ready earlier. I don't think I was ready maybe in my personal life as well as ready in my business life to have done that sooner. So I did need kind of a little bit the trial and errors, a little bit like, fall, get back up kind of scenarios to kind of really develop and structure my path. Without that, I feel like I might have jumped off too quickly. And when that happened, I could have failed. And then failing would have maybe sparked a different something. But I'm glad that I did it when I did. Even though maybe looking back, it's like, oh, I could have started this process sooner, now knowing what I know. But that's how do you get to know what you know unless you go through the process?
Totally. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and the reason I say that is like just reflecting on myself is there's always a part of me that is like, man, I would be so much farther along had I started sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no regrets, right?
Right.
Because I mean, I went through the process as well, right? I went through the education system and was very indoctrinated into being an employee and working as a healthcare professional for a hospital and outpatient clinics. And I did all the rigmarole. And then I just listened to another podcast recently about this kid who's like 18 and his business is like valued at like 18 million or 20 million or something like that.
those are some of those things like you want to kind of kick yourself a little bit in those situations, but you know, I try not to in certain circumstances like weigh myself to other people. For
sure.
Sense,
we're all on our own journey.
We're all on our own thing. But yes, definitely there's times I'm like, what? What was I thinking?
I know.
But ultimately, I don't think I would have been as successful as I am without the things that I went through.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, if I would have known that back then, that would have been great.
Yeah. I mean, perspective is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, even that example that I used, this kid that has evaluated a very expensive business is he also started when he was like 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So it's like he went through the work. He did the grind. Like he just did it at a way younger age.
Yeah.
I don't think you can avoid doing the work. Like you have to do the work.
For sure.
He
just put it in at such an early age.
Right.
And I mean, kudos to that kid to know his direction at that age. I mean, 12. I mean, what was I doing at 12? Let's be honest. I'm probably like picking bugs out of like the ground or something like that. I mean, so in that reality, I don't think I would have ever
still picking bugs at 12 years old.
Yeah. I mean, probably at certain points, you know, when I was playing baseball, I'm bored in the outfield.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I did the same actually. Now that I think about it.
Yeah. That's why I switched sports. I was like, you know, baseball was fun, but man, it just took too long to get in the game.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you circled back for me because I did want to go back to kind of what you mentioned about financial fear.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Was it just like challenging growing up? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was younger, it was definitely one of those situations where my parents were 20 when they had my sister, both of them. They were both kind of in college. So then my dad ended up, you know, finishing up with his undergrad. My mom had to stop at that time. Dad went into the military for 8 years and then kind of ended up, when he was there, he was able to get his master's degree and went on to kind of start his doctoral degree, but ended up working for a university, Indiana University at that point in time. But during that time, it was like more of like a one family, you know, income that wasn't really still the most amazing. I mean, we're definitely below like middle class and, you know, kind of went through some trials and tribulations there just for them not having any support from their family either. So it was kind of like they were on their own for the most part, which can be hard. I mean, I can imagine having 3 kids at 26. I mean, that just kind of blows my mind. But that's what it was. And so they grind, you know, they definitely grinded hard, but for sort of the sacrifice of the family. So, you know, sometimes working 2 jobs at a time, sometimes doing this. My mom one time was working 2 and going to school. One wasn't even like the most, you know, glorious of job by any means. Working Kentucky Fried Chicken, working at the YMCA, and then getting her master's in health administration. So it's kind of like just doing what you got to do to survive. And so you see that kind of hard work and that determination. That's sometimes a lot of fun, I guess. Like you see your parents be like, you don't really enjoy everything that's going on right now, but you're doing it and I'm proud of you. And so that was kind of the sense of stability, which was kind of ingrained, I think, in all my siblings, was just, you got to it's hard to kind of break away from something that's stable, that's providing you income. You know, that's some larger kind of entity there's a guarantee, there's you work these hours, you get paid this money. And then you can budget things out and you know, hey, this is all right, I can do this. Not very fulfilling, but you just kind of stick in that sort of sense of maybe feeling not even content, but that might be the word that would be used, like, oh, I'm just content with this. Because you're not really, but you're like content with like, okay, I can pay my bills, I can work, I can get a car, I can go to dinner every now and then, I can do these things, but it's just not very fulfilling. And so when I got to a point where it's just like, there's times like I would think about things I'd want to do, and then my rational mind would kind of shut me down because of what I was sort of grown up in a sense of like back to stability. You get shut down, like you kind of start shutting, like the cycle of wheel turning would start to kind of just come to a slow roll of being like, that just doesn't seem like that's really smart. Totally. Because the smart route is stability. That's the smart route. You know, you think about it. And so sometimes you think about ignorance is bliss to a certain degree. And so I feel like I've seen some of my friends over times that have really made themselves really flourish in life through like starting multiple little businesses and different things. And just once you get the rhythm to it, there's just next one. And at a certain point, their confidence for it just becomes way more, way more expanded. And they just can just now start popping these things out. And part of it is like when I was in high school, I'm like, you're not the smartest kid in the world, but there's just sort of this sense of blind faith in themselves, which I was like, that's awesome. That took me a minute, I think, to get to that point. There's a lot of times of like imposter syndrome and different things that you kind of had that you sort of have held on to that you really kind of have to just chip away and keep breaking apart. Being like, okay, I see myself. I know what I know. I know these things. I know I'm good at what I do. But that's like kind of affirmation. That's not just like, I don't wake up sometimes with that. Like I have to kind of reaffirm these things to myself to be like, okay, you're good and you know what you're doing. But I run into those spaces that are just roadblocks to life. That was also kind of another one of those roadblocks to life was overcoming that financial fear of stability. And like the two to me are hand in hand together, like stability, financial fear. You just want to be in that place. You don't want to be in a situation where you can't, you're bogged down by, credit card debt, you're bogged down by, student loan debt, all these things that kind of can start to end up being larger issues in your own mind that then become, stopgaps.
Totally. The irony in that though, is that without risk, there's no reward.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. And so that's the thing. That's where you run into these blocks big enough and you find that there is more of a purpose for you or more things that you can accomplish in this light. But part of it is also being confident in yourself to then make that jump off. And I use the term jump off a lot because to me, it is like kind of jumping off a cliff.
Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. You kind of have to, you have to sort of push yourself a little
100%.
bit, to like kind of get to the edge and you're like wanting to pull back. And then all of a sudden you just go, just take that leap.
Well, there's this idea of a financial thermostat, and I think it's one of the most underrepresented, advantages that people get when they grow up in affluent households is that their thermostat is set higher than most people, right? Is like if you grow up in a household where it's normal to struggle, to feel like you have to work hard to make money, to always have to do the grind. It's a very scarcity type mindset, is that you just subconsciously adopt that and you think that that's the norm, versus if you grow up in an affluent household and money becomes very easy and your mom and dad are just like very calm and chill and you have a very nice household, that's your thermostat, is like the financial thing is normal and easy. And it's funny too, because I'm saying this, even speaking to myself, is something that I've just kind of recently stumbled upon and growing into, is this idea that I said to myself literally today on a run, is that I want my fitness hard, but I want my business easy, because we assume that business, if it's not hard, it's not valuable. That's not true. Like it doesn't have to be hard. We just believe that because of how we're conditioned. And we somehow think that unless we're the Elon Musk working 200-hour weeks, that we somehow shouldn't be worth more money.
Do you think it's kind of like a martyr type scenario?
100%.
In a sense? Yeah, I would agree. Because it's like kind of like we need that sort of struggle to feel like we're doing the work that is required. That was, again, like you're saying, set at an early age for us. It's like that book, like Psychology of Money. Like, you talk about things kind of running at you and you're like, depending on, time and era of financial awareness or economics, people grew up at different paces. People were a little bit more skittish or with their finances, not wanting to take big risks. So stock market changes, it all kind of folds into the same thing. So that was definitely one of the things that I'm trying to kind of figure out and adapt around, because it doesn't mean that, like you said, it doesn't mean you have to work harder to be successful. You can work hard and still have a good model and still figure out ways to make things easier for yourself without feeling like at the end of the day, oh man, I'm crushed. Like totally. I worked hard today. And there's days that I feel that way, just, physically, because I feel like my job's fairly physical at the end of the day. Like, man, I'm exhausted. Totally. But that's to me is not the same as what we're kind of talking about either, though.
Well, totally. Because like if you even look at it from just like the base example of to sell somebody something that's $1,000 versus to sell something that's $1 million is arguably the exact same amount of work. It's just one of the other people just happens to have a lot more resources to be able to give you that money.
Yeah, totally.
right? Like, but arguably it's, you didn't do anything that much different. You
Right.
just convinced the person in front of you that whatever you have is valuable.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever read the book, Secrets of a Millionaire's Mind?
No, I haven't.
Okay. This is another one like the psychology of money, but similar. One of my favorite principles from this book for the listener, something that I think about often, is that even one of the subconscious things that most people do is that when you see somebody with like a really nice car, or maybe they're wearing a Rolex watch or whatever, if your brain goes to that person must have scammed, or they're a bad person, or somehow they did something shady to be able to afford that thing, you will never make that money, because people don't move towards pain. And if your mentality is that you have to do something horrible to make that money, you're never going to grow into that person.
Yeah. It's funny how that is. I think that's a typical thing for a lot of people.
Most people.
Yeah.
That's why they never make the money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, well, this is also to a certain degree, like what I feel about social media sometimes. It's like, man, like it does create a lot of negative anxiety for people, because you're like, oh, that person has that person has that. But then there's always this like kind of quick and easy, like, here you go. You can, create this cash only practice and, make 7-8 figures, blah, blah, blah.
So easy.
Yeah, it's so easy. Here you go. Just listen to me for 30 minutes and you're going to be golden. Okay, sure. Sounds great. That feels scammy as shit, right?
Yes.
So you kind of have, some of that is ingrained just by nature versus, I'm nurture, I guess, more so than anything. But yeah, that is a common kind of, I think, aspect that some people will start with, versus just being like, oh man, that guy crushed it. Good for him. Kudos,
And it seems like such a small switch, but it is a really big deal. It's a
hard one.
Yeah. And it's something I stumbled upon a long time ago of like, so now when I see somebody in, I don't know, one of the like Tesla trucks or something like that, I'm always like, they must have worked really hard to get that.
Yeah.
Or they must have like helped a lot of people, or they must have provided a lot of value,
like some good service
to the market. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's, I find myself, and I'll switch it. Sometimes I'm like, oh no. Yeah, no.
They're evil.
Yeah. No. You're great. You're good. I don't know you. I'm hoping you're good. I really do hope you're good.
Yeah. It is an interesting idea, but, all right. So, father was an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You had to grow some financial mentality, growing pains.
Yeah, for sure.
Eventually got into. So why? This is the cliche statement of all time, but why chiropractic then? Did you see like an outlet and be able to create a business? Like, why did you go that route?
It's kind of funny because I feel like I just kind of ping ponged around all over the place at one point. So I was gonna go play college football. I ended up having back surgery. So that kind of like shut that down. And I think also too, probably at a certain point, I was tired of, I was one of these guys, I was good at what I did, but I'd get hurt. And whether or not I had ligament laxity or whatnot, but I was constantly dealing with something. So I'd be like in the training room, but I would always on that field no matter what. And so at a certain point in time, I mean, that happened to my back, whether or not that was kind of like sort of fate or destiny. I don't know. I can't tell you one way or the other, but it did force me to figure out how to live with my own ailments and injuries over time. So started with human biology in undergrad, then transferred schools back from University of Kansas to Indiana University. From human biology, I actually got accepted to the architectural program, but then they didn't have one at IU. And so I kind of at that point felt a little lost. 5 different majors later, come out with a finance degree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, totally. Right. Finance and public policy. So that's what my undergraduate degree is in from my Indiana University. Yeah, right. So I have my Series 6, 63. So I can, trade some funds and annuities and stuff like that. Do I remember any of that? No, not at all. But so don't trust what I have to say when it comes to those things. But eventually I was kind of at a loss of my first career out of college. Was not comfortable with what I was doing. I kind of ended up doing like more sales at that point, and it just wasn't fun. There's nothing really enjoyable about it. And so I was asking myself my question of like, where was I happy at? And I recognized it was when I was working at the YMCA. So I started working at a gym in Chicago. So I started working at health clubs. And I did that for about 5 years. Really. And then at that point, you kind of hit this, like doing everything from operations, customer service, sales, training, all those things kind of back and forth. So at a certain point, it's like you kind of felt like I was hitting that why, that big saying that they say, like, there's 5 major decisions in your life that will kind of lead you in the direction of what you're going to go in. And that was one of them. That to me was one of them. Which direction am I going to go at this point? Because feels like I was hitting the ceiling of where I can go from here. It's either I own a gym or I go back to school. This was kind of the path that I felt like I was going to take. And I was like, oh, capital investment for a gym just seems ridiculous. I'd have to find backers, have to do all this stuff just based on like equipment, everything that would be associated to it. So I was like, going back to school. At that point, then it was a divide of like, I didn't really want to go into medical school because I wasn't really, my biggest thing with that is like, I don't want to tell somebody that they have cancer. I thought that would be, a horrible thing to have to say to somebody. I don't know if that could hit my, like, I can manage that emotionally if I had to do that frequently. Now, again, that's sort of more of like an oncologist in a way, but there's some of those things I was just like, I don't want to really kind of work in that realm. I want to work more in this conservative musculoskeletal thing, more hands-on, more direct. That was kind of one thing I was thinking about. So I was like, PT or chiropractic was sort of my options along that path. And so talked to a friend who was a chiropractor. He was actually, a little bit older than I was. He was doing more traditional chiropractic, like rack and crack kind of scenario. But at that point, he's like, well, you're a doctor. This was before DPTs and stuff like that. So it's like there's an easier access, open door kind of situation with it. And so it's like, and I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. I mean, there's a manual component to it that I really enjoy. I had chiropractor growing up, that I went to on a regular basis, not like super regular, but whenever I needed to, I'd go like the hometown chiropractor that turned a house into an office type situation. So I was familiar with it. And I was like, so I just kind of made that path, did some, prerequisites that were required. And then, just kind of jumped on board with that initially. Now, granted, halfway through, I questioned my choice originally, because I'm one of these chiropractors that don't believe that an adjustment is the fix-all, end-all, be-all. So it was kind of hard to kind of fit in to find my groove within that space.
How old were you at this point?
I went back to school when I was 29.
Okay.
So, or 28 is kind of when I started. But
the reason I ask is because I started making, I guess, better decisions around my late 20s as well. I feel like anything prior to that, I was basically just a moron. Yeah. Not saying you were.
No. There's truth. There's truth to that. So we're fine. We're on the same page. We're on the same page there all together.
Because I think even like scientifically, your brain doesn't stop to developing until like 32 or something like that.
That makes sense.
I don't know. Anyways, doesn't matter. Okay, so you realized you're not like end all be all.
Yeah, I realized I was kind of in that space, and so I did look. I was like, man, what would it be? Because up in Chicago, that chiropractic location, National University, was out in Lombard, Illinois, and I chose them specifically because they were more like training you to be more of like a PCP in a sense. It wasn't as focused as like your Palmers or some of these other ones that were just like your innate life, and some of these other ones it was like really like your innate is going to be what's going to help us heal and correct ourselves. This is a little bit more on like a little more Western in an aspect of like, here go through all the diagnostic stuff, which I appreciate because I did not want to miss anything. When I'm doing an exam on somebody, I wanted to feel very confident that I was in the right direction versus it being like, like a prostate cancer or something like that.
Totally.
I don't want to have somebody on my table for months and I'm missing something big. Totally. So I was just comfortable with that approach. And so, but then also too, kind of halfway through, I was like, damn, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. I was like, I'm trying to, but I'm not. And so I tried to look into become like a DO transferring, but at this point now I'm like 100K in debt. So it's like when they won't take any transfers. So it's like, so none of my credits would have transferred over. So at that point I'm like, well, all right, this is where we are. So kind of just went through the process, got through. And then as of when I was talking about earlier, all this time in between of not owning my own practice was really me developing my craft. So that was me kind of figuring out, okay, what do I want to do? How do I feel like I can have the best impact? What are the things that I've seen that I don't like versus what I do like? So it was all these things that have kind of culminated into who I am today. That was really kind of necessary because this education was one thing, but the way I wanted to treat was totally different. Like my clinic is sort of a totally different. A lot of people don't know I'm a chiropractor. I guess if they were to kind of come in, they're like, oh, I'd love to get my back. I was like, I'm a chiropractor. I'd love to get my back cracked, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that too. Like I'm technically a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that played out. But it took a long time to figure that out. I kind of figure out where I want where I can have the biggest impact with the least amount of visits and make people feel like they got jump off the table and they're like, that feels great. Like that's the biggest thing.
Way back when, if somebody wants to browse through some of my old podcast episodes, I had another chiropractor on here, Dr. Dan, who's actually sadly since passed away, but he had cancer. Super sad.
Yeah.
But
Was he young?
40s.
That's young.
Yeah.
For
So,
sure.
yeah.
That is sad.
Yeah, it was very sad.
I mean, it's sad regardless, but that's sad.
For sure. But I remember very distinctly on that podcast episode, he talked about how, similar to you, the reason I bring this up is a lot of what you're talking about reminds me of him. Okay. And one of the things that I remember him telling me was, I think he said his like average visit count was like 3 visits.
Yeah.
Or 4 visits. It was some like astronomically small number.
Yeah.
Because his entire mission as a practicing chiropractor was like, basically, he's like, I want to get you as healthy as quickly as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And if that means 2 visits, awesome.
Yeah, totally.
Like that was
like if you're comfortable with it now, I mean, again, there's certain aspects of like science and alone and healing and so forth. So depending on what they're dealing with.
totally. Yeah. It's not always
Right,
the
obviously.
case.
But yeah, if I can do it in 2 and you're like want to take on the rest of it, you feel comfortable with your home care and things like that you want to finish out your treatment that way, great, power to you. Like that's the whole thing, creating independence as well. Like make certain that they have some few handful of things that they know that they can do so that they don't have to come and see me. But I also say, like, you know, if something comes back, give it 24, 48 hours, but then get back in here so I can get you out of here as quick as possible.
Right.
You let that linger for like a month or so, we start creating compensations, things start to kind of fall to the wayside, and then we're having to kind of start a bigger treatment plan.
So a couple of things I want to pull back on
Sure.
that you mentioned. What was it that you loved so much about working in the gym environment, or was it just the front facing, working with people?
It was the community, really, more or less. That's what I liked about when I was at the YMCA. My mom was the fitness director of the YMCA, so I grew up in the YMCA. Like I was like doing all the camps. It was free babysitting. Is pretty much what it was. But like I grew up there, like so everything was just a part of it. And so I just really liked the community that was associated to it. It was a fairly large, YMCA for the area in Bloomington, Indiana, and so they had like everything that you would really need. And so when I started working there in high school through college, just doing like floor supervisor stuff, like kind of picking up the weight room, just basic things. I just enjoyed seeing the people, and a lot of them were all fairly happy people too. They were either with a friend walking the indoor track, or there was some kids playing basketball on the basketball courts. Go in there and help spot somebody, show somebody how to, do a proper technique proper technique, what I was kind of taught at that time.
Sure.
Proper technique to do it at a specific exercise. That was back in the day when racquetball was like a big thing too, racquetball affiliations and stuff like that. The guys with the racquetball bags and the gloves hanging out. When I was a kid, I thought they were the coolest guys in the world.
Jesus.
I know.
Okay.
I quickly learned, but when I was just like, yeah, man.
So what about, so you're walk me through, you're halfway through chiropractic school.
Yeah.
You're not fully bought in, but you're committed to finishing this program.
Yeah.
Why?
Again, that's kind of breaks down. I've already spent this kind of money now.
Okay. So you're pot committed.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. At that point, I mean, I do like part of it is still like kind of the big grander scheme of like, I know that there is a healing aspect in this one way or the other.
For sure.
So I'm not like deterred by that sense. I just didn't really I wish the program would have done a little bit more. And they started towards the end providing more like rehab, like professors to come in and do more of a specific sports specific type kind of approach. And also too, like when I was in chiropractic, the one thing that was kind of deterring in a way is like, they're like, oh, a lot of you guys come in here thinking that you're going to treat a bunch of athletes and all this other stuff. And it's like, really? And they're like, reality is you're not. It's kind of like their approach to it. And
yeah, it's going to be Gen Pop.
Yeah, totally, 100%. And, majority, and I think my patient population, I would consider a lot of them athletes, I mean, athletes in their sense. I mean, they're working out 4 or 5 times a week, whether or not they're doing, a high rocks competition or training for a race. They're in some way kind of training for something. And so and it's an active population, which could also still kind of classify in the athlete kind of side of things too. So it's definitely not the sedentary population. So I feel lucky that I feel like I accomplished what I was out to accomplish.
Well, the good thing is you're in a city like Austin where there's lot of fit, healthy people.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge key to it for
100%. Yeah, your location. I mean, this is something I see with so many of the clients that I work with is like I can pretty clearly tell you like what your revenue and what your client population looks like purely based on your location.
Yeah.
Like if you're
That's
like,
fair.
Yeah, almost always when I look at a chiropractic clinic or a PT's clinic or whatever is like when I look at their city, I can almost immediately tell you like pretty closely like what their revenue probably is and who they're typically seeing and if they're cash based or insurance based.
Right.
Almost always.
So you can like, but the interesting thing about it sometimes is I never wanted to be like in more of like a smaller city. It was never something I kind of really was comfortable with or wanted to be in, I guess, personally. And so, but man, some of those small little like, real rural chiropractors, those guys crush because everybody's just loyal to that person.
Yeah.
So it's just like boom, 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 boom. But it's like it's a 3-minute like kind of
Rack 'em,
crack 'em kind of scenario, and that's kind of what they're playing with. Which again, to each his own. Some people, I get some people on my table and they just swear by it, and I'm like, good man, I have no problem with that. I'm not going to take that away from you.
Yeah, I mean, to your point exactly, is like there is a game to be played in terms of having no competition. I just talked to a PT in basically like I think it was like small town Alabama or something, and he's like the only physical therapy clinic within like 50-mile radius.
Yeah, totally. So he's pretty much he's capitalized on that market.
Yeah.
You shouldn't really have to do any marketing, guy.
No, and he really doesn't for the most part.
That's what I'm saying.
I was like, how do people find out about you? And he's like, we're the only ones. So
yeah. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? There is nobody else.
So there's a game to be played to that.
Yes, totally.
Okay, so I want to get into now your clinic because at some level you must have drank some Kool-Aid because you managed to turn CoreFunction into voted number one in Austin.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, nice. 22 and 23.
How'd you pull that off?
Well, first time, the first time it happened, I didn't even know that was going on. And so I was like,
how did I do this?
Well, it was actually somebody at one of the owner of Hit Athletic I was working with them, and they're like, oh, congratulations. I was like, for what? And they're like, you won this. And I was like, what? I was like, that's awesome. That was sort of the best one simply because it was kind of like, I didn't promote it. I didn't like. Whereas the next year, I was like, "Oh yeah, we won this. Let's
do it again.
Let's throw some text messages out there. Let's get people to vote." That's kind of the thing. And so, so that first one was really kind of special because it was only after like a year of being open too for me. So it was kind of quite impressive.
And remind me, did you open it or did you buy it?
I opened it.
Okay, so you started it.
I started it.
So from zero to this.
Yeah, 0 to that.
How? Tell us all.
So I mean. So I moved here in 2015 working for like a larger corporate, rehab company. And I worked there for about 6 years during that time. And then I switched over and started working for another well-known chiropractic clinic that did a lot of the modalities I'm doing currently, which is, just dry needling, fascial work, adjustments, rehab, like little quick spotted rehab stuff, not doing like a full 1 hour routine like traditional PT, but enough to get people, kind of make people a little dangerous for themselves. And so
I like the way you say that. I want to make you dangerous for yourself.
Yeah. Get out there, crush. So that was, underneath the original umbrella of the larger corporate entity, it was more like I had to. It was Starbucks in a way. So you didn't really create a name. You'd have patients that would know who you are based on your like level of care and your interests and everything. But the technique and the therapies were all the same. You just had to use your hand. Your hands were the tool. There wasn't really any adjusting. It was just manual therapy, pretty much is what it was. All like deep fascial work. And so when they would sell that, they'd sell it as like, if that patient's out, like, if you call in to the scheduling line, like, oh, that person's out. Oh, well, there's another person that's just like 2 miles down the road. They're doing the same thing. So you didn't really create an individual kind of name within the community that you lived in. So that was kind of hard. But when I transitioned, I did have a handful of people that followed me to, my next step, and just kind of created, again, just good, solid care. I mean, like, and actually just genuinely caring. I think that's kind of like my biggest superpower. I feel like I definitely do have a lot of just, I have a lot of drive for somebody to feel better. It's just kind of a natural sort of like healing nature within me, I feel like. And so that is, I think that shows, it really shows to my patients when I have them on the table. But I don't just, and I also try to get to know them too. I think that's, that's that word of mouth. That's where that marketing comes from. That's word of mouth is your best form of marketing, to be honest, especially within your community. And so that was kind of like the biggest thing about it. And so that then transitioned to, when I left that last place, started my own place inside of a yoga studio, like just a single room while they're building my studio out. And thankfully, weirdly enough, like this yoga studio just finished getting built, and this is all in my complex, where my office is. And I was just kind of actually my mom was in town. I was showing her the space that I had just leased, and I was like looking through the yoga studio's window, and one of the owners was kind of walking by, and she's like, yeah, you got any questions about yada yada? And I was like, I really need just a room to rent for like a period of time while this is getting built. And she was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Oh, wow.
So the transition from that place to the other one was just literally down the catwalk. So I was like, there you go. Like I didn't have to because when you kind of get a lot of patients kind of jumping, it gets, in my mind, it would be like, man, this is kind of frustrating a little bit. You kind of get accustomed to one space. And now if I had to drive like 2 miles in a different direction, when I kind of figured out my route, I know how to do this. I know my schedule works with this. To get them to do it again, I was a little hesitant. So this was just perfect, like very serendipitous in a way. And so I was able just to seamlessly transfer those patients that I was seeing there, who a lot of them followed me over. And I tried to once I kind of put in my 2 weeks notice there, they let me go immediately, which is kind of common, for some of those, practices.
2 weeks, get out.
Yeah. Like we don't need you. We don't want you. So they pretty much let me go. Then I was able to get in that studio in 2 weeks, like within a 2 week time frame. So I didn't really miss any of the people I was working on. So they were able just to kind of just jump right into it. So it was a very seamless, I felt like, which was to my advantage. To try to be on that. So
would you say that, you briefly touched on it, but I guess would you say that this is a lame statement, but is caring, is it that simple? And the reason I ask this is because, so I had a shout out to Megan Faulkner, if you know who that is. She's another chiropractor.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm familiar.
Up in North Austin area.
Okay, yeah.
But I had her on a while ago. If
yeah.
anybody wants to go check that out. But
yeah.
We had a similar conversation, and because as I used to be a practitioner as well, not chiro, but OT.
Yeah.
And I hated caring. And so
that's why you changed your job.
That's exactly why I changed my job. And so I'm not saying there's not value in it. I'm not saying there's not.
It's also being really good at what you do.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the other thing. Like I said, I'm my first patient. So I've had surgeries. I've had all kinds of things. I can't even count. I can't count the amount of surgeries I've had on 2 hands. So that's kind of my extent of injuries and things that I've dealt with, mostly sports related, some other things. But so I have a ton of empathy in that situation, but I can also correlate and relate a lot of their issues to myself. So I understand truly when people are like, oh, I understand, that's bad. It's like, I truly understand. I know what that feels like. I've been in that place. I can relate. And okay, so when people say they stand up, it's like, oh, you stand up and do this, and you kind of feel like you can't totally extend all the way, and you're kind of stuck down in this position. I'm like, I was there maybe 4 years ago, so I know what that's like. But because I know what that's like, I've also used myself as a template, and I've kind of figured out, okay, this works. This really worked well too. So when I'm treating, I kind of know the places that have an association. So some people, if you think low back, won't go to the TFL. They won't go to that muscle group. And that muscle group can have a big impact on your low back pain. And so there's kind of those are the things that you kind of start to kind of piece together. And you're not just addressing pain, but you're now kind of thinking about the whole thing. I'm looking at how this mechanical thing is messing that mechanical thing up, and we're just winding down the train. And that's really the most intriguing thing for my job, is truly is everybody's a little bit of a puzzle. It's you kind of play, look at it and you're like, okay, how does that work? How's that working? Of course that would have an impact up here, right? So people are like, okay, we got to get this ankle moving, or we got to fix that pronation, because that's offsetting your hip, which is then making your knee have all this like internal like medial knee pain. So it's those things that are kind of fun, but also just the time spent over time doing these things to kind of be like, I know where to go. Like, and you can feel it pretty quickly, and you're like, okay, let's move in this direction. And then you can get them off the table and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, it reminds me of why it's so helpful to have experienced the things that your patients or customers or whatever, right? Like if you're starting a business, I don't think it's mandatory, but I think it is super helpful to have previously been that person or been in that experience, because I think what it does is it cuts down on the learning curve and it cuts down on the nuance. Because like no matter what your endeavor is, whether it's chiropractic care or name any other business that you're interested in, there is a depth of knowledge and nuance that you don't understand until you get into it. And so having gone through the experiences of your patients, you can be like, oh yeah, like I get that. Not just like I get that logically, I get that emotionally, I get that because I've been there. I get that because I've tried many things myself and I understand the nuance of these challenges. It's one of the advantages of like scratching your own itch or like having that experience.
Yes, for sure. I do think that that's important. It's been important for me. I feel like just simply like having those individualized experiences and also understanding how they impacted me in my life. Like the frustration associated to it, the frustration associated to not being able to do what I wanted to do, to also sense of chronic pain ended up like truly tagged with depression in a way. Chronic pain over time is going to make you, a little bit more depressed in a sense, because you're just not able to do the things you want to do and you're frustrated by it. You're frustrated that your body's not working with you. Mentally, you have this capacity to want to do these things, but physically you don't, and you want them to be hand in hand together. So that I get that, I see that. And so it's sometimes it's one of those things too, is like I have to also disassociate to a certain degree, because it's like I can't fix everybody, can't help everybody.
Are you pretty high empathy?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that's common with chiropractors.
Yeah, for sure.
Super high.
Yeah.
I'm super low. I am. I know.
I don't care.
I know. It's so sad. I am though. Like it's just like self-awareness.
That's totally good. Know thyself. That's the number one thing.
For sure. I love our cats, but anyways.
I like mine too.
I like cats. Maybe that says a lot about.
That's a low.
That says a lot about me.
Low empathy thing. I have one as well, so it's all right.
That's good to know. I would love to get into the community aspect of things, because you touched on it briefly in terms of just like how you love the community at the YMCA. Is this something that you're thoughtful about with CoreFunction, your business now? Is this a part of it?
Yeah. I mean, that's a kind of, it was a big part of it. I think when I was starting it, something like the mission statement was simply, I wanted to be that guy, that like, quote unquote, that guy. So people were like at the gym and they're like, oh, I got a guy, kind of like that scenario. Like I wanted there to be enough like in my community that they'd be like, oh, there's this guy, he does this thing.
Yeah. He fixes that.
He does that. Yeah. That's the guy you need to go to. So like in my own head, initially, that was kind of my big picture. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to achieve that. So there's a lot of working with gyms, CrossFit boxes, different things in my general area within sort of like, the radius that really makes most sense. But I also try to contribute, however, like with any sort of outside events as much as possible. One, that's marketing, that's exposure for me. It's sweat equity in a sense. I look at it like, I'm more than gladly to put that little bit of extra time aside to get in front of a different group of people, maybe run clubs, or like there are other opportunities within corporations, which I personally haven't been able to be involved with within CoreFunction, but I've done that with the other more corporate entity I worked with, which was fun. I mean, education is actually, I enjoy that aspect to the job, and actually being in larger environments. I used to think that I wasn't a really good public speaker, but when I know what I'm talking about, I'm actually really happy and excited about it. It's an opportunity to kind of share the things that I actually really kind of get really jazzed up about. So, yeah, community to me is great. I'd love to be, however I can be involved into it, the more the better. It only does me good, really, in the big run, but also too, the more I can kind of feel like a part of that community group would be excellent.
I like what you said about public speaking when you're excited about it, because like that's the same excitement or the same feeling you have about like nervousness and fear is also excitement as well. Like
Yeah,
a
for
little
sure.
bit elevated heart rate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I think it's funny too. It just made me think of, I think that's also true with introversion, extroversion, is that I'm very introverted in a lot of ways
Yeah.
until you get me around like
A bunch of people.
well, the certain type of person.
people. Yeah.
Right? Like if you get me with my buddies, like
Yeah.
I'll go.
Totally different. Totally
Yeah,
different
yeah.
person.
You
Totally
get me
different
just like
quarter.
a random group of people I don't really care about, I probably won't say a word. And so
I know exactly what you're saying. I'm an extroverted person for sure. Like, I kind of thrive off the energy of other people, but I definitely I know I'm in need of a recharge. Just I think with the empathy and different things along those lines, you got to kind of take a step back every now and then.
Something we've touched on a couple times, and I just want to make sure the listener can hopefully glean something from this, but it seems like you've had to overcome just a lot of, you call it jumping off or fear or challenges of starting CoreFunction and growing CoreFunction and investing in the business. And how have you been able to overcome some of those things, or what are maybe some moments that have been like pivotal for you in being able to do that?
Well, I mean, I think the first one was just actually starting the business itself. That was really, I think, the hardest part. I mean, it was just kind of like, it was actually when I ended up going back to school, same thing. It's just kind of like, okay, you got to piece this together and figure out how to do this. So you kind of go through that rational mind of like kind of step-by-step process. And then that step-by-step process becomes a loop. And you're kind of stuck in this loop of like, when is the right time? And again, there's never a right time, never is. People will say that about a lot of things. I'm just waiting for the right time. It's like, when is that time? Because it's never going to happen. And so that was kind of like the biggest thing, is just kind of coming to that realization in my head. There's never going to be a right time. Now, some things felt a little forced to a degree, because I was like, okay, like I have to make this jump now. I feel like it. So there's a combination of things. But it was all leading in that direction. So whether or not it was the right push I needed to kind of push me in that direction, I'm just going to say yes.
What was the moment for you? Like, what was the moment where it was like, all right, I'm doing this. This is happening.
So for example, this is really interesting. It was one of these things where I had kind of already started with my LLC at the last place I worked at. I already started the LLC process, was looking at leasing spaces, all these things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put in my notice at this point. And that notice time kept on getting pushed a little bit. I'm going to put in my notice at this time. And then eventually they'd caught wind about it. And so it was kind of like, okay, you either got to tell the boss that you're doing this or whatever. And I was like, not like I wasn't not doing my job. I was still doing my job. But also, too, it's kind of like, you've never been in a corporate environment before. This is kind of how people do things. Like, I'm still doing my job. I'm still here. I'm looking at the finance. This is a paycheck for me that I still need or I'm accounting on. So when that was kind of pushed on me, I was like, oh, dang. But
they're like, get out.
Yeah, was it kind of like, one was just saying like, okay, I heard that this was happening. You need to talk to the owner and, so on. And there was a lot of kind of like sort of, this is unloyal and all these other things. And I was like, that's kind of BS, man. I'm like, there's nothing unloyal about this by any means. It's just looking for future growth in a way.
Yeah, who wouldn't do that?
Exactly. And if you're not kind of doing that, then you are just in a stalemate with the rest of your life. So that's kind of what it was. But that was a catalyst. I'm not going to lie. To just be like, okay, that's it. Pull the trigger. Like I said, the next week I had a space I was working in. I think the next week is like 3 days later. I bought a table on eBay, rolled it into the yoga studio, and boom, there we go.
And you said your patients came with you when you?
A lot of them did, yeah.
Wow, I was surprised you didn't have like a
non-compete.
Yeah,
I didn't, which is interestingly enough. But I don't know how well those kind of really stick around.
I don't think they do. I had one when I was an OT, and I went from one business to the other. I don't know. I don't think they're super legal.
Yeah, exactly. And there was some sort of thing like here recently in the legal system about that. But anyways, neither here nor there. But yeah, so that was. Back to the question one more time.
Yeah, I just wanted to tap into like some of the fears you've had to overcome or some of the challenges you've had to overcome to ultimately starting the business. Because I know like so much, I don't like, this is again, cliche statement, but so much of building a business isn't actually, part of it is definitely knowledge and skills, but I'd argue most of it is like belief in between your ears.
Yeah, for sure.
Like your ability to just believe you can do it and figure it out. Like there's are tons of very successful business owners that are dumber than a box of rocks.
Yeah.
Because they just believed they could and they had no reason not to.
Yeah, like previous comments. But I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think to a certain degree, it's kind of like, I don't know if I just kind of flipped into like a survival mode to a certain degree, where it's just like, you're just on autopilot, like, you know, things that need to get done. Now, I also did have, you know, I have really good family support too. So I'll just say, like, you know, from my immediate family members and so forth. And so there was kind of a like, hey, let's get out there and help, you know, kind of situation. So I did have some of that, like with like, okay, buying furniture, getting things painted, doing things like that.
Your family did this?
Yeah, well, really mostly my mom.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. It was really impressive. And so she came down here for a week and we just crushed it and got out things. Because when I moved over to my new space, I didn't even have a trash can. I was like, oh, dang. Just wheeled my table back over and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't really, what? And she is one of these, because I was talking to you about her, she just grinds. The woman knows how to grind, and that's it.
Still that way?
Even she turned 70. She'll be 71 in June. She just doesn't know how to do it. She's got no other gear. I swear to you, not. Like, we're going to IKEA. I bought this, like, you know, like tabletop counterpiece that was like I don't know, something like 8 feet long, but it was running from like the back to the front of my car, and I couldn't see to my right. And my mom's like, "You can merge now." And this is like at like 9 p.m. and I've worked all day and this whole thing, and so we're just kind of running through this process. And so, yeah, she was by my side, and I really appreciated her for that. That was huge. But yeah, I kind of went into an autopilot phase where it's just like, that's that. But the next step was really, now that the dust has settled, so you're kind of running on steam. Dust has settled. It's like, okay, what's next? You know, and that's when another round of that kind of fear can kind of start to creep in of like, where do we go from here? You know, what's the next step? How do we continue to grow? How do you push a brand? How do you do these other things that, you know, are all kind of new to me as well?
Fun journey, man.
Yeah.
So you started the clinic in 2021.
Yeah.
What's been your best marketing strategy since starting the clinic?
Let's see. I mean, really, the best way is just really the event. I mean, not all are winners. Don't get me wrong. But none of them are bad in a way. Some can not be very. That's how I looked at it. None of them are bad. But some are better than others. And so you kind of have to figure out where your niche is with that one. And also kind of just really weigh the event out a little bit more. Like, you know, marathon, for example, is going to be a lot of work, but you're going to have a lot of out-of-town people. So is it worth your time to kind of be in that space? You might get a lot of looks at your banner, at your tent, or whatever might be the case. But the people that are really kind of edging for it, especially post-race, immediately post-races, they just want help then at that time. They're not really care about what your next step is. They're like, just help me with this cramp I'm dealing with in my calf, right? So I've kind of gone through that process of weighing what is good for me versus what is not really, you know, productive, I would say.
What's the number one event that you found or you got the most leads from?
Let's see.
Can I tell you one that my girlfriend told me recently?
Sure, yeah, please.
She, car dealership.
Car dealership. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I would have never thought that.
I wouldn't have either. But she was telling me that the other day, and I was like, when you obviously this is always clinic specific.
Yeah.
But based on the care that she provides in her location, and it was great because of like the injuries they typically deal with, and they have extra income because she's cash based, so there's a lot of factors in that that made it specific for her clinic. But I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah, totally, 100%. I never would have thought about that, but that's nice thinking outside the box. I appreciate you for that.
Stumbled on anything.
Yeah, no, like nothing kind of I wouldn't say that that's obscure, but for me that would seem kind of obscure to be in a car dealership.
For sure.
But like, yeah, most of mine are more health related, health events in a sense. And I'm trying to think. There was at one gym I was at when they were doing like a mini high rocks competition. Like they're just doing like high rocks warm up. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's where we met.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
I think so. I think
with Bray? Oh, no, somebody put us in touch, I think, from.
Yeah, why is his name drawing a blank? I know Bray, he's a buddy of mine.
Yeah.
God, why is his name Noah.
Noah. Yeah. Noah.
Noah connected us.
Yeah, totally, 100%.
Anyways,
yeah.
but yeah.
I met him. Yeah, he was doing one of those squat races. Those guys are, they push hard. They have a great community.
Yeah. I just did High Rocks in Houston.
Oh, did you? Yeah. So my associate just did High Rocks in Houston. She PR'd. She did really well.
Solo, double?
Yeah, solo.
What was
106, I think.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a savage.
I know. I think she got she got third in her age group, I think is what
I'd have no doubts. That's an incredible time because the
maybe it was 109, but
so what?
Still, yeah.
Anything under 110 as a solo is great.
That's what I thought. I mean, no, she's trained hard. She pushed.
The men's double pro set the world record that day. Yeah, I think it was 50 minutes.
Wow.
It was 50 or 51, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
But it was a new world record.
That's pretty awesome. That's impressive.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress.
Yeah,
okay,
no worries.
So you were at
So some of those like local, because the thing is about what Squatch was really great about is, again, it's a good community. So a lot of those people after a race, post race, stick around. And then they're also local. So that's a win right there versus some of these larger events that people are coming in to do a race or something that you just don't know where they're coming in from. I've done a lot of pickleball things, and those are kind of a little bit of a wash too. Same thing. Like I ended up working like a 3-day one out in Horseshoe Bay, and I ended up treating something like 70 people over the course of that time. And I got one. I snagged one.
Nice. Because they just happen to be living in your area or something?
I don't know really what it was. I was like, because I worked on her, and I was just like, she's like, this is great. My neck feels amazing, blah, blah, blah. And so she's like, I'm going to come in. I'm like, okay, awesome. But then I have other people, San Marcos, San Antonio, so a lot of the people I was working on, a good 90% of them were not local Austin individuals. So that's kind of what you have to weigh a little bit more. And so some of those, like for the marathon specifically, $1,000 to set up a tent. So ROI, what are you looking at? That's kind of a big question you start asking yourself.
It's always the question.
Yeah.
That is always the question.
Yeah. And then everything. You just have to kind of, with the knowledge of it, it's like, yeah, it's great. It sounds good. Lots of people, but are you just going to be, burned down and not get anything really from return? So then you roll on Monday, you're like, man, I just crushed myself for not a whole lot.
So I think the deeper lesson in that, I guess, for the listener is, this is what I'm hearing, is that the best events are good. I don't think there's anybody that would argue that doing local in-person stuff is always going to be highest conversion, because like anything in person is going to be better than online, period.
100%.
Doesn't mean there shouldn't be both strategies. But what I'm hearing is that more a strong community versus a hyped event.
Yes.
Because a hyped event is going to be like a lot of random people from a lot of random places, but no real loyalty.
Yeah.
Versus a community that has loyalty.
Yeah.
If you bring somebody into that, or you can get involved in that, you're basically tapping into the already built-in trust of the community.
Right. If you get one individual within that community and you help that one individual, then the word of mouth is going to spread so much quicker, and that's a win. That's a huge win.
I like it. Thanks for the insights.
Yeah.
What's the biggest business challenge you faced in what is it now, 4 years? 4 years?
Yeah. Well, the biggest one I think was just when to upgrade, when to level up. Next one, what's the next step? Again, same thing back to, there's never a right moment, and I kind of would try to be like, weigh that. And like, okay, 1 month I was like, that month was so busy, I was slammed. Okay, time to hire somebody. And then the next month's kind of like not as busy, and you're like, I'm glad I didn't hire anybody. But that could have been the ideal time to do it, because I had extra time to train at that point. It would have been easier, So eventually, you just kind of pulled the trigger and was like, okay, there you go. And it's been great. I mean, Dr. Val, continues to kind of push herself, and she went from more of a traditional chiropractic realm to what I'm doing more now. And so it took some education, it took some additional certifications and so forth, and, doing a good job with her members. And really kind of, she's one that's embedded in that sort of that High Rocks community, because she's competing. So she knows a ton of these people. So she's really got her foothold in there. And I think it can only grow more or less. I don't do a lot of group things, again, with my own individual, injuries that I've suffered from. I still do my workouts, but it's more of an individual pace. But she's got that. So I'm like, that's your jam. You go crush that. So it was just one of those things that, there's never a right time. You just got to do it.
So true, man.
Yeah.
What do you think it would take to go from a 6-figure to a 7-figure practice, like for the listener?
For me, right now, I'm paid based off of my time, right? So it really does come down to volume, unfortunately, to a certain degree, but volume that it's my world that can be still very productive for the patient and patient-centered focus. But it's now adding more providers. It's potentially like I'm looking at adding an additional unit, which is a stem wave unit, which is a shock wave. That has a little bit of a higher ticket price to it, but some of the outcomes and the research around it can really kick some of these chronic conditions into the next level. And whereas I'm amazing with acute and subacute, as well as chronic just takes longer. So if I can provide another service that can take those chronic patients and cut their healing time by a third, and get them back to where they want to be, that's a win, and that's also a modality. So it's either, you either bring on some other form of therapy that can be a sort of a standalone within your clinic, and you can hire somebody to do that specifically. You add more providers to it, or then eventually you just end up cutting your time to add more people onto your schedule, which is not something I have any interest in wanting to do, because I prefer having that 30-minute time with my patients. I can kind of knock out 3 to 4 regions sometimes, depending on what I'm doing, how quickly I'm moving. I also just don't like being rushed, man.
I just talked to another chiropractor out in Boca Raton.
Yeah.
Is that Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very affluent area.
Yeah.
So I can tell you they're doing well. But
yeah, sure.
He's he offers a ton of like modality services from like stem cell to all sorts of stuff.
Oh, so he's doing stem cell like injections?
Yeah.
See, so he's gone kind of like regenerative medicine route.
Very much.
You go that route 100%. I mean, if you want to, I looked at IV stuff at one point and I was like, it's different in Florida. You can own that practice still. Like here in Texas, it's like you can't own the majority. Like you have to go through a lawyer to create a working, a legal document that like your medical director really owns 51%. I own 49. I have like, power of attorney. Yeah. It's like this whole thing, and that alone costs anywhere between, if you have a lawyer doing it correctly, anywhere between $12,000 to $15,000 to do that. And that's what I was just looking at doing IV stuff. One slow summer, I was like, okay, what can I do during this time? And I was like, this just seems like too much of a headache for me right now. I mean, maybe down the road. I mean, my next step is more of an office manager, and then, or like a PT assistant or a chiro assistant, somebody who can do some administrative, do some, maybe train them on the stem wave, train them with some rehab stuff. So we can make the flow of things a little bit smoother and kind of get with scheduling, make things just a little bit easier on the practitioner. Do those patient retention things we were talking about earlier. Like keep your patients, keep at the forefront of your patients as much as you can, because they're always everybody's always dealing with a little something depending as you get a little older.
Definitely.
So
I didn't realize there were so many legal issues with that here in Texas.
Florida's different.
Because he brought in a nurse practitioner, which I know even
that's legal in Florida. Here you have to have a medical doctor.
Oh.
Like you have to have a medical doctor for sign off, but then you can have a nurse. A nurse practitioner can't do it. It's got to be a medical doctor. But then you can have nurses. You can have registered nurses do the work for you.
Interesting. I got a round of rapid fire questions for you.
Oh, wow. All right.
It's whatever the first thing is that come to mind.
Okay, let's do it.
Short and sweet. What's your best business advice?
Just do it.
Nike. Best marketing advice?
Be available.
Favorite part about entrepreneurship?
Independence.
When are you the most productive?
Afternoon.
Okay, I like that. Who is your inspiration?
I'd have to go with my mom.
I knew you were going to say that. Tell us one secret or something most people just don't know about you.
Ooh, let's think about that. I don't know. I feel like I'm on the spot. You
got any like weird hobbies or childhood experiences?
I tried to get into making Legos again as an adult, just for a hobby. And I didn't really get successful at it, but it was something that I kind of thought, like, oh, this would be good. Because I do like gratification, instant gratification in a way. If I can build something, I can see it. That's great.
I remember as a kid, I used to do model cars, and it was the worst thing.
That
of all
sounds
time.
horrible. I did have one. I got one and I hated it. So I bought this one and it was not like a Lego set. It was sort of a knockoff. And and so the directions, I was like, I don't even know what this piece is. It's not even labeled. It's ridiculous. So it's short lived.
Yeah, the model cars was.
That's worse with the paint and everything.
Yeah,
Wow.
I remember a very.
Sorry.
The reason it stands out to me is that it kind of like brought up an argument between my dad and I. Because like I wanted this model car because I was a dumb kid, and then he ended up being the one building it, and he's like, so he got pissed off. It was a whole ordeal.
That's like kids who was like, I want a dog, I'll walk it. No.
Yeah, exactly what it was. What's your favorite app or resource right now?
Favorite app or resource? I'd say ChatGPT, just conversationally.
Yeah, that's a hack.
Yeah.
Anyone listening, I use it as a consultant all the time.
Yeah. Just chat. Just really talk to it.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, get some insight, get some things. I've used it for, random things all the time.
I transcribe everything too. So like when I have client calls or meetings or anything, it's like I'll take it and transcribe it and get the summary.
Okay, nice, good.
That's a good hack too.
That's a good one too. Yeah. Do you do it when you do Zoom? Do you actually kind of throw them on as like an assistant?
Yeah, I have a Google. Well, for Zoom, I use there's an extension called Tactic, TACTIQ. Mm-hmm. It's a Chrome extension.
Okay.
And so any Google Meet, Zoom, anytime I'm on a video call, it automatically records it. And then it gives me a summary and action points after the call.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really good.
It's amazing.
Really
There's a few of them that do that. But yes, I would definitely have like some sort of recording or AI assistant, whatever, something in there listening and then transcribing it for you. Cause like there's things you miss or whatever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I just did this, it's with a group of sort of healthcare related, we just did a meeting like last week for the first time with a few, like a PT, one was like a meal prep person. And it was, they just did the same thing. And I was like, wow, you really did a good job. And it's like, oh no, that was Google.
Totally. Yeah.
I was like, wow, you're really paying attention. I didn't even see that.
No. You're like, it just recorded and transcribed now.
Yeah.
I have one last question. Before I ask the question though, I want to acknowledge you, man.
Oh, thanks.
For taking the leap.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
For making the jump.
Yeah.
For, drinking the Kool-Aid and sticking it out and really providing some serious care and to be able to make it to ranked #1 voted best chiropractic clinic for last.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you
awesome.
very much. Yeah.
Before I ask my last question, what's your plug? Where can people find you?
You can go to CoreFunctionAustin.com. And right through there, you can always book online very easily. It will take you through my website. You can also just call the phone number there. It's actually a cell phone. It's a working cell phone. So, be cautious. but I am available pretty much anytime. If anybody would call, I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Cool. So.
Oh, and CoreFunction Clinic on Instagram.
Perfect. So last question. It's really whatever your best piece of advice is. So if you were to go back to ground zero and you were to start over CoreFunction and you were to be talking to your younger self or anybody else in a similar circumstance, what's maybe the best piece of advice you'd give to them?
I think that's kind of a hard one for me in a little bit, but I just think the bigger picture, really. Stay focused on the bigger picture. Because I think ultimately you can get bogged down by all the small things and they can start to frustrate you. And then they can start to sort of almost even at a certain point frustrate you, intimidate you. If you got the bigger picture in mind all the time, you kind of have to take a step back and see like, what are you working towards? What is the goal? Look down, have that 5-year plan, have that 10-year plan, try to figure out kind of what that is, what that means to you, like how important you value that, like give it some real weight around it. And then just don't let the small shit kind of hold you down.
Yeah, was it Viktor Frankl that if you have a big enough why, you can do pretty much anything, basically?
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that one too.
Thanks for being on the show, brother.